All right. We are recording again, just to remind you, you're on tape. Okay, so we've talked about some of the things that are in the recovery category already, but there's one that we haven't yet really, and it's to do with land prices and lower land values, which started to come out in the during, but is also something that, at least according to you guys, is more of an after thing than a during thing. So you wrote that and you wrote that. So why don't you, either of you or both of you, not at the same time, talk about what you were thinking there.
I based mine more on what I saw in the last kind of drought circumstance was how valuable the surface water wells became.
Okay.
In fact, I'm also a certified appraiser, so I do farm and ranch appraisals, and we noticed the price of a well basically because you could do those comparables from just surface water farms to ground and surface water farms.
Okay.
And get what the groundwater was worth basically, and it rose rather rapidly.
Okay.
And more or less stayed there because in people's memories before that, it was a long time. You know, I guess they're more expensive to run, so the surface water is a little cheaper. And without a drought, some of those wells weren't maintained. They hadn't run for years and years. All of a sudden, people were calling the well man and said, "I'm going to get this thing running," and spent some money doing it.
Okay.
And people were recognizing the value of those,
okay.
and so that directly impacted the land prices.
Okay.
$500 to $700 an acre.
Okay. So you're actually talking about higher land prices. You're talking about lower land values. So what can we do? What do you think?
I was thinking that typically there's a lag.
Okay.
From, here's your drought,
Mm-hmm.
and your prices remain your land prices are about the same.
Okay.
But then you start seeing the reduction following that.
Okay.
Just like with commodity prices.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
During even with the lower commodity prices, land prices stayed pretty favorable. But as the economy, stayed at a low level, then the prices have dropped. We've had poor prices the last 2-3 years, but the land prices just in the last year or so.
Mm-hmm.
The lag.
Okay.
Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Okay, so you're thinking of it more, John, in a short-term sense, and you were thinking of it more in that slightly longer.
Well, I would agree with him.
I'm not saying that he's wrong, but it sounds like you're sort of talking about two different time scales.
There's two different things going on.
Okay.
He's definitely right. In the early 2000s, I was of the view like that he described that. So what if you had a well?
Mm-hmm.
Deal, because we had plenty of surface water.
Right.
Why would you want to pump if in fact you had that?
Right.
In the early 2000s, it became very apparent what those costs were. Now, in that period of time, as he mentioned, they had to get those things revitalized.
Mm-hmm.
They had to incur costs during that period of time to get that alternate source available, because they were running them on tractors and they needed a lot of maintenance, a lot of work.
Okay.
So your costs were higher then.
Right. Okay.
But after that, then people
Yeah,
all of a sudden you see post in the late 2000s, or around the late 2000s, the commodity prices went up, land values took off, but at an accelerated rate when they had a well, when they had alternate water.
Okay.
Has that changed at all since they got allocated? I mean, are they still worth that much more, even if they're limited, like on Pumpkin Creek and stuff? Yeah. They're not very much.
Well, there's no surface water. But in the valley, yeah, they're worth more if they have water. I know.
Yeah, and then with the moratorium where you don't have the ability to drill new irrigation wells, I don't see them. Here's the thing, what I was speaking of as far as in people's memory, people have short memories. And so if we stay wet, like we've been wet you know, for what, the last 3 or 4 years, I don't know how long it's kind of been recovered, yeah. I think that if it stays more normal precipitation and we have good surface water supplies, the longer that continues, you may see less of a difference in the price of a well or dual water farms compared to just either just groundwater or just surface water farms, because if they're not using them, if they don't have to use the groundwater, then perhaps the value will diminish, just as it did, you know, in the previous time. So
Just because people forget.
yeah, that's what I think. I don't know.
That's a possibility. Do you think that'll happen?
Not very soon.
No, because I think that farmers today value that early water.
They do. Yeah, and pivots, you know, have changed that whole
They've
picture
changed
as
that
well.
exactly.
A lot of farms.
Yep.
Pivots have been added around here in the last, say, 6 to 10 years. It's phenomenal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Which is much more efficient, of course, but with those early water or groundwater utilization is so much easier.
There's two things. First of all, the early availability of water. You know, growers are finding out what the value of is at early and uniform emergence.
Exactly.
So that will always have a value. The other thing too, if they want that early water, you press a button.
That's right.
Where if they're going to get surface water, hopefully, if it's there,
Yeah.
it takes longer and there's more cost in getting
Yeah, exactly. So the pivots are making the use of early surface water way more efficient than if, well, we had to irrigate crops up by ditching and they weren't even, that was impossible, near impossible. You guys been through it.
But you're also missing labor, the labor costs involved between surface and groundwater. That's the biggest factor anymore.
It's the biggest factor, how much can by management,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little bit off the subject as far as.
It's sort of related, but I'm gonna cut you off before it gets too much
Yeah.
further afield. Okay, so related to what we just talked about, are there any other things that we need to add to vulnerabilities? So, for example, when we get to that part where land values are going down, what are some of the consequences of that? You know, or what is affected by that?
by lower the land price. Balance sheets are certainly
Yeah,
sure.
affected.
Sure. Okay. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, that if the market value land prices are going down, that assessed values also go down. What happens then?
Big deal. Big
Okay,
deal.
why is that a big deal? What
Well,
happens?
because of your municipalities.
Okay,
Your
so your
schools.
taxing authorities, everyone who's relying on that tax revenue,
Exactly.
doesn't have that now. Okay. Okay, so if you have less tax revenue coming into all of these entities that rely on tax revenue, what happens? Wait, who is most vulnerable in that situation? What are the things that are most affected?
You mean beyond the schools? You mean?
Well, it could be in addition to the schools.
That's what
So,
I mean.
Okay.
Well, the schools are
What
the
else?
obvious one.
Any
Okay.
government aid type stuff.
Okay.
right?
Any public,
okay,
entity,
okay,
go from your subdivisions in your homes to fire departments, your street maintenance, the whole municipality operation. The community, as far as that goes, it don't even have to be a city, it can be the county.
again, so just like with the producer and consumer question, does that look the same everywhere?
Should
You
look
said no,
similar.
why do you think?
It could be the same scenario where lower income groups, right?
Okay.
They're more heavily relying on government revenue for their district.
Okay,
I don't know if that's true or not. I'll just say it could be.
okay. Who else? Are there, so besides lower income groups, is there anyone else that might feel that more?
Well, house owners,
Okay,
we have a heavy reliance on property taxes here, but they'll shift somewhat then.
Yeah, the
shift in what way?
urban
What do you mean?
taxes. would be
Well, if
going up.
the land
Okay.
values go down, then they're gonna have to shift that burden to someone else.
Okay. Are you thinking, you started to talk about urban taxes, are you thinking about urban area taxes going up and to rebalance the
Well, houses-
decrease
You
in?
gotta maintain
Okay.
revenue, so you gotta, if you've got a loss in one area, you're gonna increase it, whether it's sales tax or income tax or
Okay,
property
okay.
tax.
Yeah, well,
There's
Okay,
mill
so you're
levies.
thinking about, other sources of tax revenue besides property.
Yeah, I don't know where, they don't cut taxes, they gotta make it up. They never
Well.
take a cut.
I mean, if you don't have the revenue,
Right,
if they don't have the source of it, then they're gonna have to start cutting budgets.
yeah, that'd be the,
And they're
Okay.
doing that all of the above, I think.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is another.
Okay, is there anyone else, so we talked about homeowners and lower income groups who might be, particularly affected by these attempts to make up tax revenue from other sources? Is there anyone else who, that would hit particularly hard?
Could be businesses.
Okay,
People have government jobs. If the government has to cut tax, they don't have enough tax money. Could be anybody that's employed by the government.
okay,
probably hits the private sector before it does the public. You know, as far as cutting your labor force or your labor pool.
okay, anybody else? Okay, are there any other impacts that you happen to think of before we move on that are not already up here?
Have we covered the businesses very well, very much?
Do you feel like we have?
I don't know.
Is there more that you want to talk about with the businesses?
Well, I think we've all agreed this is an ag society over here. Ag society is a volume industry.
Okay.
And when you cut the volumes, it'll affect every industry that touches agriculture.
Okay.
I mean, your elevators will operate on less volume. They're volume driven.
Okay.
Your sugar company, depending on the scope of it, they're certainly volume driven.
Okay.
Your beaneries are volume
Okay.
driven. So.
So then what happens?
So what happens?
So what happens to them?
Less employees.
Okay. So
Then
we
they have
have,
to reduce their cost because they're
Right.
volume driven.
right,
they'll have
and you point out that is one way that businesses tend to do that.
Yep.
Okay. So in that kind of situation where you have those businesses who are cutting jobs, is there a particular group of people that affects the most?
Wage earners. Well, it impacts your business owners. It impacts your labor force. It impacts all of them.
Okay. So we've got businesses themselves. Do you want to break out business owners and wage earners as separate from this? Just to make it more clear, maybe?
I don't know.
Well,
I bring that up because it's the impact goes quite a ways.
Okay, does that impact look the same for all businesses?
No,
Does it depend on size of business? Does it depend on what the nature of the business is? What are the
yeah,
things
the
that make
nature
it
of the
look
business,
different?
yeah. John may have more more equipment sales.
Okay,
Typically is what happens there. Your livestock exchanges will be selling more cattle.
okay,
So they benefit,
okay,
but at the expense, as someone mentioned earlier, at the expense of someone else.
okay. So some business owners are gonna hate it and some business owners are gonna think it's great.
Well,
But it kind of depends on the nature of your business?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you think it depends on size of business or some other factor besides what you?
Well, it'll hurt the smaller ones, obviously, because
Okay.
this is all volume driven.
Okay.
Not all volume driven, but a big part of it's volume driven. Volume tends to reduce overhead costs.
Anything else?
Well, it's going to put maybe a bigger, if you've got, it's probably going to impact your wage structure, because if these business owners can't afford to pay more, there'll be a reduction in the labor force, a reduction in and so it might put additional stress on your social services.
Okay, good. So job losses. Wage structure. But so additional pressure on social services, is that a vulnerability or is that an impact?
What's their impact?
Okay. Is it an impact that happens pre, during, or post?
During and post.
During and post. All right. So increase demand on social services. Good one.
On that issue, I remember from a drought in the past was the increase in hotlines for farmer crises
Mhm.
popped up.
Mhm.
You'd be surprised how active they were.
Okay.
You think farmers are independent, I can handle this on my own, I'll take care of it. They did call that hotlines.
So what is the impact? How would you
Oh,
phrase
gosh.
that impact?
Oh gosh, it's range from your household marital situation,
Okay.
relationships, and emotionally to financially to,
Alcoholism.
I'm sorry.
Alcoholism.
Suicide.
Yeah.
Suicide.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
all
so
kinds of-
if we maybe wanted to phrase that in impact terms, are we talking about increased mental health stresses? Are we talking about
just counseling services.
Okay. Okay.
How do I deal with this stress? I may be new to this. How do I handle it?
right, okay,
I mean, never been exposed to it before.
okay, so maybe increase in mental health stresses is the impact, but
Mental and physical.
mental and physical, okay, but maybe establishing those hotlines or seeking counseling services.
That's a true statement.
Does that make sense?
Actually, if you go into FSA now, they've got those cards for people to call. I guess it's for the, any of the, I can't remember what they call it, but it's like a suicide hotline. People that are losing their farms. I guess, I don't know. I just was surprised to see those in there. They got a little yellow card.
Where are they at?
In an FSA,
Oh.
they're reporting to the
That's interesting.
yeah, on all their days.
Well, I serve on the state FSA committee, and believe me, the stress is not just local, it's
Mhm.
everywhere. And the inquiries in our farm service or farm credit is huge to
Okay. Any final thoughts? I want to move us.
I did have one question earlier on when you were talking about post-recovery and you were talking about the preserving the aquifer.
Mhm.
One thing that we haven't brought up, and I don't know if it's a factor or not, but with the big development on the Front Range,
Mhm.
and our water source comes from the mountains.
Mhm.
Are we losing some of that recovery downstream because of the extra development on the Front Range and in the foothills along, like
We're in a-
25?
we're in a different watershed.
We're in a different drainage basin.
Okay,
You would see that more if more of our water came from the South Platte
okay.
River. You would see that more. But the North Platte drainage is outside of where the water sources for all of that development are happening.
They've got their eye on it. So.
Oh, yeah, not for lack of trying, but.
Oh, yeah.
The Arkansas River Basin in South Platte, there's a lot of requirement, there's a lot of stress on them.
Mhm.
Colorado.
Yeah.
I know the North Platte leads into, or out of Colorado, into Wyoming.
A little
Colorado,
smidgen, yeah, but the part of the drainage basin that's in Colorado is like this big compared to all of the part that's in Wyoming. So there isn't a whole lot. There's some, but it's not much. Okay. So we've talked a lot about impacts. Good job, guys. We made a list of vulnerabilities. Are we all comfortable with this? Okay. Now I want to talk about preparedness, specific to you guys. So what I want to know now is, are there things about drought? Maybe you think about some of these impacts. Maybe you already are doing some of these things that we talked about in strategies earlier. What are the things that you're doing on your operations right now, or what do you wish you were doing or think you ought to be doing in order to prepare for some future challenge?
Myself, I look at it like maximizing my production with resources I have available. Being prepared if those resources are affected.
Okay, but what do you mean by being prepared? What does
Okay,
being
like,
prepared look like?
Like not grubbing it down so that next year I don't have anything to go to begin with. For grass, for rangeland.
Okay, so you
You want to overgraze it.
Right, don't overgraze, right.
okay, so but you tailor your range management for longer term use as opposed to
Let's put it
shorter
this way.
term. How do you
manage it
break
for
that?
the immediate, but with the mindset that be prepared to change if conditions change.
Okay, so you build a certain amount of flexibility into
Be able
your
to be
management.
flexible, yes.
Okay,
We do the same thing. We in fact leave the pasture so we know we have one to go to.
Yeah, yeah. Just like carrying over hay from last year, you know, you always have a little bit.
okay. So when you're doing that, thinking about the impacts that we just talked about, what are the things that you're trying to prevent? Or what are the things that you don't want to? So what do you need that flexibility for? What are you hedging for?
First thing is cost. Cost
Okay.
control, input control.
So input costs is one of the things you're trying to, what else might you be doing that's related to these impacts that we talked about?
Well, then too, you want the range or the ecosystem, you want to preserve it. I mean,
Okay.
like Leo said, you don't want to eat it down to nothing, but yet you've got to, you want to maintain, keep it viable.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, if you talk about particular operations, in our operations, one of the many things that we're trying to do is reduce our irrigation requirements.
Okay.
And we did that with years ago by putting pivots in. And not only was the labor saving, but it was also water savings. We intend in the future to be going towards drip irrigation. We think that's the future. We use probably a third less water. We're using moisture probes. Moisture probes have really been a management tool that's helped us immensely. We've reduced our water requirements and our water usage, I should say, just by, we always, when we were kind of flying in the dark, we would we'd make sure we had enough. Mm-hmm. This way, we have a better handle on what our usage is and what we do have available.
Okay. So, in thinking about the impacts that we talked about, you mentioned you're reducing your input costs a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also, in reducing your demand, is that related to your aquifer level at all?
Yeah.
Is that part of what you're thinking about? Okay.
Well, that's, our requirements, if we go to drip irrigation, our requirements obviously will be less. Because you can use about a third less water. I think that's something we should certainly take a look at. What's it do for our aquifer? Well, we may not use as much, but we're not replenishing it either.
True, but if you didn't take it out to begin with, so that's a difference
Yeah.
between surface water and
Yes.
groundwater. If you don't take the groundwater out to begin with, it's still there.
I think drip irrigation in this area, particularly North Platte Valley, because we have a rolling terrain in the North Platte Valley. Consequently, we have irregular shaped fields. Drip irrigation is wonderful for it. And the Pumpkin Creek, in areas where we rely strictly on the aquifer, we're just going to be drawing a third less.
Okay, so it's partly related to aquifer levels, and then it's partly related to the allocation that you guys have there. Okay. Are these the only things that you're?
That's the only thing we're doing? No.
Well, no. Are these the things that you are addressing by doing this?
Yes.
Okay. What other things are you doing?
We're going to less tillage, either
Okay.
minimum till or no till. Every time you work your soil, you're probably losing 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. So the fewer times you work the soil, the less moisture you're going to draw from it. And so you reduce your cost and you reduce the water levels.
Okay. So this input costs keep coming up. I can't imagine why that is.
Yeah.
So input
Kind of
costs.
what drives us.
Input soil health sort of generically. What else?
Another result affects production is the seed companies have gotten smarter in genetics and tailored crops for droughts.
Okay. So
They're
is that
working on it anyway. I mean, they're in strides.
We're planting drought resistant.
Yeah.
your okay?
And it's going to get better. It'll improve. And with those tools and soil monitors and all that, we've gotten smarter with irrigation.
Okay. So we kind of talked about that right there. When you're choosing your drought resistant crops and you're thinking about these impacts that we talked about, what do you have in mind when you're doing that?
You still gotta be able to make money.
Okay.
Yeah, stay in
Okay. So you're
business.
still anticipating that maybe your yields won't be as badly affected because it's drought resistant?
Well, in
Is that
agriculture, it's a volume business. So your impact that you can get your overhead costs will be better,
Okay.
lower.
Okay.
You have more volume.
Right.
We're also cost driven.
Sure.
We're cost driven now. You may pay a little bit more for a drought resistant trait, but your
Okay.
yield should be better.
Okay. So you are trying to get ahead of this
What is that?
poor yields.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of people like to grow on wheat too.
Okay.
Yeah, alternate crops. You know, sunflowers, wheat, millet, those things.
We did that for several years and then couldn't keep ahead of the hail, so we gave it up.
I don't know what the hell does to have a hail.
Yeah. Really big.
There were a few years the only moisture we got were hail.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do you guys do?
My
Or what do you wish
parents
you were doing?
My parents sold water rights off their farm.
Yes, we did. Okay, so maybe permanently retiring irrigation on some lands. Okay.
Especially for poor quality ground, I guess.
Yeah,
Save it for the good ground.
yeah, if you got marginal production,
Okay.
you're gonna take those out.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
really, that's a good point right there. There's a lot of fields here in this valley particularly that probably could be eliminated
okay,
because the cost of production on some of these irregularly shaped fields probably don't warrant the cost of doing it.
okay,
And
So-
certainly huge water usages on these things.
usually, yes. So when you're doing that, you're thinking about your production costs? Okay, are you thinking about water demand? What are,
For that, the
Labor,
thought process for them was to be
labor.
able to, you know, it was an income that allowed them not have to
Okay.
have so much. You know?
okay,
It wasn't really a strategy to save water so much as it was another way to make money. Different source of income. So I didn't have to provide it. Yeah. I mean, that just puts stress on property taxes and everything else to come up with the money to pay for that.
where that money comes from? Yeah.
So I mean,
Where's it from?
it's not really, I don't know how effective a program like that could be long term because the money comes from somewhere.
Exactly. Well, it's not something that we can do forever. We're not going to do it forever. Because of that. Even though Leo is right, there are probably a lot more places out there that ought not to be farmed. We can't afford to retire.
I'll tell you, these pivot corners are crazy. Now, one thing that I'm on a roll on subsurface drift.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we really haven't done any yet, but we certainly investigated a lot and looked at it. But you have 160 acres, excluding the roads and ditches and whatever. But let's say you have 150 acres. Well, with a pivot irrigated thing, you have maybe 130. So what happens to the other 20 acres? Well, with drip irrigation, you can pick that up. You can pick that up so you can utilize the land,
Mm-hmm.
but you use a lot less water.
Mhm.
These corners on these pivots, there's really no reason to be farming these things. I mean, we can do a lot to reduce our cost and our water usage on our pivots.
Yeah, but it always takes money.
Sure.
Well,
It's a lot of money to put in a drip system.
Cost benefit ratio.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta be able to afford to do that and still be able to stay financially.
some of these pivots anymore, especially where they put these
Oh, those
corner deals,
Sure,
and
I know.
those damn things are, hell, I don't care if you're just doing a regular deal. You take 150 acres and you spend well over $100,000 to develop that thing. What the hell do you have per acre in that?
Oh, sure.
Now, if you take a drip irrigation where you get an additional 20 acres, what's your difference in cost? I mean, and I think your return's a hell of a lot quicker because your operating costs. Look at your power cost and a lot of other costs that are associated. You can put fertilizer and other inputs through the system as well. I personally think. Oh, she shut me off.
Yes, I am. Drip irrigation is great. I think that we have heard your missionary statement. I actually think subsurface drip is pretty great. I want John to give me something to put on this list.
Well, I was gonna have you write labor savings down underneath that last one, but you're
This
asking.
The irrigation retirements?
Yes.
Okay.
But you were probably directing that question more towards the real estate side, or were you?
You can answer it from the real estate side, sure.
And it's not very easy to answer. Right?
Okay.
Mm.
So you don't feel like there is something that the real estate industry sector can do to either prepare for drought or consider drought in your business operations?
I've been thinking about that quite a bit since we started this process. And,
Okay.
it's really hard to put my finger on anything in particular.
Okay.
I mean, it would be, if it were labor, I don't know that we've geared up or geared down because of drought necessarily. I think I've said that real estate is somewhat like owning a liquor store, and that people are selling when they have to because times are rough, and they're buying because they want to when times are good. So they're always drinking.
It's kind of a reactive business. you react to the circumstances.
At the risk of being shut off again.
Well, Leo, with you in the room, you know it's going to happen sometime.
I think his business, when he's selling a piece of land,
Okay.
he says, okay, this is the immediate return, but it's also the long-term return. And if he, in fact, he can convince that buyer that he has a way to mitigate drought, that place has more value.
That the buyer has a way to mitigate drought if they buy this piece of property, or
If it has the ability
Oh.
to mitigate
Okay.
drought in the future.
Okay, so are you talking about maybe him changing his sales pitch?
I'm listening.
Say we're a buyer and seller.
I
So
can
we're
see
negotiating right now.
Tell me what I need to know about you so I can sell you more land.
Yeah. I mean,
So, but I'm serious. Are you suggesting that one of the things that they can consider in their business maybe is modifying how they talk to potential buyers about a property and how they talk to, well, their clients on either end about a piece of property based on drought capabilities?
yeah, I think what he says, this piece of land will be productive in a drought, without a drought.
Okay.
As an example, it has dual water,
Okay,
as he just got done saying.
okay,
It's more valuable. And that's been our experience too. The first 30 years I was in this business, I said, what the hell are we doing? Or 25 years, I said, why are we concerned about a well on this valley
Okay.
property?
okay.
All of a sudden, my son doesn't even really want to look at a property unless it has dual water.
And it doesn't just go for irrigated properties. And I guess I do that subconsciously without thinking about it. Because
Exactly.
I have a property listed that it's pasture. And it has 5 or 6 sources of water if you count the pond that was just developed on it. So and that property has a lot more value per acre in the seller's mind and in the buyer's mind, because it's drought tolerant virtually. It has a lot of stream. It has solar wells on it that are shallow, 50 to 60 feet. It has a lake that was redeveloped to hold water. It actually has water right out of that lake, which it's a pasture. So, but that's what I glare across the web page is look at this water.
Okay.
I knew damn well we were going to get a sales pitch for this one.
So if anybody's in the market. Okay, so then is it fair to write down on here that you tailor your clients' conversations
We certainly have.
with drought in mind?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You mentioned that dual water sales pitch has been fabulous over the last, since the last drought occurred. And it's not as great a sales pitch as we keep getting rain. Still fairly fresh.
But also that early water has real value. Alfalfa.
Yes. But we actually.
Wheat
get to
especially.
drink early.
Wheat especially.
Okay, so when you do that, what kinds of impacts do you have in mind? So you mentioned your water source, which has, as you discussed, a relation to the land price or land value itself. What else might you have in mind, or might you think the client has in mind when you're telling them?
More productivity.
Okay.
Better the water, the more the water. Sometimes that's in their mind.
Possible source of added revenue.
Absolutely. It even leads to soil types, etc. What kind of soils properties have, because some hold water better than others, and it's really about the water. This is a desert. That's why we're talking about this.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in the valley here, where you have one source of water being surface water. In many years, if you don't have that alternate source of water, that aquifer, that wheat crop almost becomes a dryland crop.
What is the NRD's goal with the aquifer? Is it to return it to its original level, or you just want to maintain it?
It's mostly a maintenance thing. I mean, one of the things that we have to do is increase the stream flow in the North Platte River during certain times of the year by X amount, and that's related to the flows that are required downstream for endangered species. But that's only calculated based on development that's happened since 1997. There may be additional stuff that we have to do to get a little more water back into the stream that gets calculated based on development that happened prior to 1997, but we don't have, there isn't a sort of time zero that we have to get back to. You know, I don't think we even have enough information to know what that original aquifer level might have been. Because at this point, the system, particularly with all of the irrigation canals, is so human modified that it would be really hard to figure out what did it used to look like before there were people at all. So that's not really a reasonable thing to aim for. But in the long term, even if we didn't have these stream flow goals that are tied to downstream species, you know, we do also want to be able to maintain life here. You know, the economy, the general quality of life. You know, we're not in the business of drying up everybody's farms and making you go find something else to do, because ag is a giant part of this economy, and it's part of our job to make sure that at least that we're not either by enacting policies or failing to enact policies, that we're not doing something that forces that to go away.
Try to keep it sustainable.
Right.
In last week's paper, there's an article by the ERD that you're talking about, the person talked about credits, like you had an 16,000 credit and you need 8,000 more. Can you
What I'm talking
elaborate on
about.
that a little bit?
Can we talk about it at the end?
Sure.
Because that's a little bit off topic.
Okay.
And I'm happy to answer those questions, but I want to make sure we get through this discussion first. Okay?
It's nice to know that I'm not the only one who gets shut off.
See
She's
rule
making a
6.
round.
See rule 6. All right. Does anyone have anything else they want to add to preparedness? Either stuff that you're doing now or stuff that you wish you were doing, think you ought to be doing. Think would be helpful for other people to do.
Well, I think there's a lot of water pumped in town on grass that doesn't do anything but look pretty. I don't know.
Okay.
If they gotta be
Okay.
limited on what can be pumped out of farm wells, why doesn't city water be limited on what can be pumped on grass?
Okay, so in terms of preparing or considering for drought, you think that maybe cities should or municipalities should start to think about some of those same water availability or limitation things that ag people do. Is that a fair way to say it? Okay.
I mean, look at that big yard they put around inland. I mean, is that really necessary? A lot of grass to water that doesn't do anything. I'm sure it uses the allocated amount for everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of runoff in municipalities. You look at the structures, the streets,
Okay.
there's no restoration of that. It goes in storm sewer. There's no, I don't know, it seems like a lot of runoff.
Okay. So you're thinking about that from a water availability.
Sure, you know,
Standpoint.
if
Are
we're
there-
trying to keep the,
Okay.
we're trying to, I think I've heard from somebody out of the NRD that this is, our water allocation now is not enough to, I mean, it needs to be lowered again or whatever in order to meet requirements in the future. And supposedly that was part of the reason why they're buying out acres. Is that right?
Sort of. I'll answer that again.
Okay.
Can I risk getting shut down?
It's about time you get shut down.
That's my turn.
Yeah.
I think in this preparedness discussion, the topic of having a goal to reduce the effects of drought should include perhaps lifting the moratorium on drilling irrigation wells. At some point in some structured manner, of course, but I don't like the fact that that's not being talked about. Because I would think that groundwater is probably, I realize there's a huge demand downstream. I'm worried about the balance of what we've been limited to for what the expectation is downstream of us. And if we're going to prepare for drought, the best way would be to have irrigation wells and not rely totally on surface irrigation. So can there be a trade-off between surface and groundwater in western Nebraska that would help with this drought preparedness goal?
Like maybe allow our allocation to be higher during drought area times and then lower that allocation
You're
during.
starting to sound like that guy over there. Okay. So with those things in mind that you were just starting to talk about, and this is the last thing I'm going to make you do, and then I'll answer questions, other questions that have come up here. And we can have sort of an informal discussion about what you were just talking about. So the last thing that I want you guys to do is try to wrap all of this up into some goal statements. So these aren't necessarily goals that have to be part of the final drought plan. But as the ag and industry, until he was left, group, what, in moving forward in this planning process, well, actually, before we do that, or as part of this, one of the things we want you to do is we want you to decide, of all these impacts that we talked about, which ones are the most important. And then we're going to try to make some statements out of that get brought to the whole group as things that this group thinks are important things that we ought to be talking about in the drought plan. Okay? So we have a lot of impacts up here. Some of them are kind of related. Some of them are sort of standalone things. So let's pick 5 that are the most important. And they can be in any particular order, or you can rank them according to which one's most important to the least important for those 5. That's entirely up to you. But you all have to agree on which ones those are. So, which ones are the 5 most important impacts, do you think?
I'd say the economy, the local economy, I would say, the whole.
Okay, so the whole impact on the economy, or impacts on the economy, okay. 1.
Flexibility on the producer side, you need that flexibility.
Okay, that's not an impact.
No, that's true.
That's sort of a strategy, kind of.
Yeah, because
But
the 5-year plan was the best thing that came along, because now we knew what we were dealing with and we could adjust our operation to affect. So flexibility is an option that's really necessary.
okay, but that kind of falls sort of in strategies. That's not really impact of drought. So if we're talking about what are the top 5 impacts that are up here that we want to, that this group wants to try to address in a drought plan, what are those top 5 impacts? So we have the negative economic effects.
I think we need to try to achieve a goal of reduced water usage.
Okay, what is the impact that you're trying to address with that?
Well, then once we learn that we can sustain yields that are consistent, we get into a drought, we're more prepared to do it because we know we don't have to use as much water.
Okay, so are you talking about when you're talking about that in impact terms, are you talking about lack of water availability during a drought? Are you talking about
the requirements for water would not be as great?
Okay. So in a drought plan, it is important for this group to address a lack of water availability. It is important for this group to address poor yields, or all of the above, or both of those things, because that brings you up to 3 if you pick both. So what are the, so I'm trying to list out 5 of these deals, okay? And I'm gonna move them actually for a second. So I'm gonna borrow this one because it says kind of the same thing. So
What is that one? I can't read it.
this one says economic consequences for community, which is roughly the same as the whole economy that Trevor wrote down. Handy. So this is one thing we want to write a goal statement on. Nobody objected so far. So if you had to match the thing you just said to one of these sticky notes up here, and actually water availability isn't on here in so many words, are you trying, is this the impact that you want the drought plan to address? This says poor yields.
It says what, poor yields?
Right, or reduced crop yields is also what you wrote. Is that the impact the drought plan should be trying to address? Or is it, you wrote lower levels of the aquifer, which is sort of related to, a lack of water availability.
Well, I think long-term we have to maintain our aquifer.
Okay, so this is the impact you want to address. With
Yeah, I want to maintain the aquifer.
Okay. I'm gonna put these back.
Well, it's gonna go with poor yields, because if you wanna maintain a viable economy, you have to sustain those yields in some manner.
Okay,
Yeah,
And
well,
if you sacrifice water to save, well, then your yields are gonna fall
that's
off
why I want to maintain it, because if our aquifer drops too far.
at the sake of
That's not
people
an
going out of
alternative, that's
business.
not an alternative water supply to a drought.
For the sake of people going out of business. You wanna see people go out of business to save the aquifer at a
I don't think we
short
have-
period of time?
I don't think we have to. I think we have to find ways to reduce the reliance on
Yeah.
use less water.
We have to say.
Be more efficient, be more efficient with our
But
water
there's gonna be
use.
a cause and effect though. If you wanna save the aquifer, to cause that, you're gonna have to affect your yielding or your operations.
Well, let me let me ask you this.
Okay,
If you're gonna use 18 inches of water to raise a 200 bushel crop of corn with flood irrigation, or if you could do it with 8 inches or 10 inches with drip irrigation at a lower cost, don't you think we ought to be looking at that?
right, I agree with that.
Because that maintains our aquifer.
Okay, I agree with that, but if you're looking at impact, okay, like let's say next year, we're gonna say, okay, we're in a drought. Okay, what are your steps you're gonna take? Because you don't want to you lose your yield, so the impact would be you don't want to lose your yield. You take the expense of putting in that drip system to save the water.
But once it
or to
happens,
save
you're a little
yourself.
late. You're a little late.
Right.
So I think you need to prepare. You need to be
Okay,
ready.
so
Because
that's why-
there's two benefits.
you know,
First of all, if you go to something like that uses less water, we went to pivots, use less water. And also, and when we get into drought, we've got more reliability.
I agree with that concept and that futuristic approach down the line, but for immediately impact, I think poor yields ought to be a consideration. What can you do to limit that poor yield?
Well, as I say, I think the way you deal with a drought is to prepare for a drought.
Okay,
And what do you do?
okay, so you take
Well,
steps
it's what-
ahead of
yeah,
time.
because-
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it now? I mean, drought hits now, we haven't, how do you prepare? Or what do you do? And if you haven't prepared for it, you're probably gonna have poor yields and you're probably gonna be out of business.
True.
But you can't just prepare all at once. You
No,
have
no,
to-
no.
You have to have a plan to mitigate the effect of that drought.
Okay.
I think it's bigger, kind of a bigger circle might be sustainable water, sustainable livestock numbers,
okay.
sustainable production and commodities. Those would be the goal statements.
Those are goal statements, right? What are the,
So
what are the impacts? What are we doing?
we have to pick those that are too narrow.
Well, we can make broader statements
Yeah.
out of the narrow things.
Okay, production,
Okay.
both in livestock and crops. Production has to at least be maintained. Somehow, more level production through the drought is the goal. Which kind of says speaks to his yield thing,
It sort of does. I'm actually gonna put,
but also crops or livestock, yeah.
all right, since you're talking about both. You get 5.
How many do we have?
If you want to throw this in with this and generalize it as production, you have 3.
Can we include, in the aquifer levels, just, about even the surface water, sustainable surface water and groundwater?
Okay, so do you want to put this reduced stream flow
Okay.
in the same category or as the aquifer? Do you want it separate?
I don't know if you can find.
Uh-huh.
What do you guys think?
Well, it could be a separate one, actually, I think. Kind of a different.
Yeah, one more. I'll read these to you.
Yeah,
Leo.
read them.
You don't have to see them from there. So that I
I
make
still
sure
can't see.
So we know
I can't
that-
read my own writing for God.
Well, I got nothing for you there. Last one. What do you think? Are only 4 of them important?
Right. I'll just narrow this, try to figure it out.
Okay.
I mean, wildlife and the ecosystem are important. They could probably go along with the stream flow type thing.
Well, they do and they don't, because wildlife live in lots of places besides in the river.
But they all rely on it.
The drought affects
Well, they all
erosion.
rely on water, but the mountain lions up at the top of the Wildcat Hills don't go swimming. So,
Thank God.
yeah. Boy, life would be a lot of fun around here if they did. So, do you want to pick wildlife for your 5th one? Is that where you're going?
It's important too. But it needs, someone needs to say, we need to have sustainability, like John was saying. That's
Okay, well, we can get to that when we're making the bold statements. But in terms of, is this number 5? He's looking skeptical.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just squinting to.
The goals are what we are trying to achieve. Is that what we're trying to do here?
Yeah, what you guys think we
which
should
of
be
these
trying.
ones we're trying to address?
Like recreation and wildlife are kind of similar.
They're sort of related, but not identical.
Right. But I mean, do you want to, as far as an ag industry group, I'm not sure that we're as concerned about recreation as we are about the economy.
Well, you don't necessarily, I mean,
I don't mean to speak for everybody, but I mean, I didn't know if we're supposed to focus on our ag.
you don't have to. No, if you think that's a good number 5, we can make that number 5.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. You don't have to be answering this just
From the ag.
from, things that only relate to ag.
Yeah, it's okay with me.
Okay.
We're trying to develop some type of a consistency, though, so that it'll mitigate the losses that could have occurred in a drought. And all of those things. I mean, your population declines, your effect on social services, all of those things. And what are we trying to do that the 5 best ways to mitigate those?
Not quite. No, you're looking at what are the 5 things that you want to try to mitigate or develop mitigation strategies for. Now, you're right that some of those things end up sort of falling out from the other things. Like we have the economic resources of the community that includes things like the population and jobs and stuff like that. So yeah, there are other things that could be broken out from that.
So that doesn't include the ag economy success, that number 1?
I think it should. It needs to be the whole,
Okay.
the whole economy.
Right, that's what he was talking about, was the entire economy.
Well,
Which
I
relies
think you could-
mostly on ag.
that's what I was just gonna say, it starts from ag, so ag's kind of.
I don't interpret the word community to mean a village. It's a
Well, that's what my
area,
question is.
but everybody's involved in the community.
I'd say the wildlife and ecosystem are
Okay.
important. That's the people, the economy, and farming and the wildlife, and everybody who lives here and relies on it.
Okay. Do you want to hook recreation to that, or do you want it to stand by itself?
Well, that's part of, I mean, that's part of it.
They're related, but not identical, so do you want to combine them for this purpose? Okay. All right, I'm gonna put these back over there, we're just gonna use them to write goals. All right. So, this group, in terms of the economic consequences, the community-wide economic consequences, economic impacts of drought. If you had to make a sentence that says what this group thinks the drought plan should include or address or think about, or what the drought planning group should think about relative to the economic consequences for the community, what is that statement?
Create a sustainable economic
Environment.
situation during a drought, I guess.
Okay.
Lessen the effects of it. So it doesn't-
Okay, so lessen the effects and create sustainable are not actually the same thing. They can be, but they aren't necessarily. So what are you talking about? So when you say when you create a sustainable environment, economic environment, are you talking about just lessening the economic effects of a drought while it's happening? What do you have in mind there?
Well, we need to implement strategies, be prepared, and be ahead of the game, I guess. But I mean, we're not going to completely not feel the effects of a drought.
Sure.
I don't think there's any-
Sure, but you think that part of creating that sustainability and being ready for that is to try to get ahead of the game, to
Sure.
implement something ahead of time. Okay.
I think that's the only way you can really do anything is be ahead of it.
Okay,
I don't think when
so
you're in it, there's a whole lot you can do.
there may be different things. that you can do. Okay, so let me see if I can phrase it. Let's see. Create strategy. How about, and you can tell me if this sounds right or wrong, develop strategies prior to a drought to maintain a sustainable economic environment. Is that fair? Is that fair?
Can we actually create something though? Is that the right word? Because
That's a
create makes it seem like we're in control.
Okay.
And we're really not. We're
Okay.
susceptible to whatever nature and environment throws at us. So
You implement strategies.
Develop
Okay,
and
you like
implement.
implement and develop?
You said
develop or-
develop,
yeah,
Oh, I did, okay.
not create so much.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So do you want develop strategies or develop and implement strategies? Okay. Okay, while I'm writing this, and I hope I can remember my entire sentence, you guys be thinking about lower levels of the aquifer, or groundwater availability questions. I guess we can call it lower levels of the aquifer. What kind of a goal statement do you want for that?
I'm sure it's there.
Implement whatever we can to make sure that we maintain our levels, our aquifer levels.
How about promote instead of create? Promote, correct? Okay. Okay, so lower levels of the aquifer. You started to formulate something. What do you, and you had started to formulate a goal statement actually earlier when we were talking about this one.
Well, we want to encourage the sustainability of the aquifer.
Okay.
I mean, you want to encourage measures that would promote and extend the life of the aquifer.
Okay.
We need it for life.
We need it for stability. We need it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, it would be pretty rough trying to farm here with all the available coming out of the mountain. It needs to be.
Or all the clouds.
I think we ought to be, to sustain our, not only sustain our aquifer, but to be prepared. I think we need to be looking at ways of providing incentives or educating producers, not only irrigated but dry land and ranchers, whatever. How can we reduce our reliance on water? And how can we be more efficient with our water usage?
Those are actually objective statements.
Oh.
So a goal statement is sort of your overarching thing you want to be doing. Objective statements start to talk about how you're going to do that. So that sounds more like an objective statement, and we can write that down too, but we need a goal to go with it. So what's the goal that you're...
Use less water.
You want that to be your goal statement, use less water? We can do that.
Well, more efficient use of water.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so...
See, she couldn't wait. She had to cut me off way more. I had to drive 35 miles and do this abuse.
If you didn't enjoy it so much, you would have left a long time ago.
I should have gone to see the governor.
So from a goal statement perspective, this group thinks that the goal should be to
Preserve the viability of the aquifer.
preserve the viability of the aquifer, okay?
By using less water.
By using less water or using it more efficiently.
Yeah.
Okay,
Efficient use is
okay,
priority. It's
okay.
important.
Yeah, we have to be able to use it. That has to.
You know, I mean, the goal is more efficient use.
Right.
But it
More efficient
also-
use does two things. It
It
provides.
also shouldn't just fall on Ag's shoulders to do that. But, I
Well, we're
mean,
not saying it is.
okay.
You're just you guys are the guys in the room. So this is
More
this
efficient
group's
use
position, but you're not
sustains
saying
the
you're the only ones doing
aquifer
it.
and sends more water passes.
So why is the goal, I mean, I don't like the goal of sending more water passes. Maybe we can develop more
That may not be our
irrigation.
goal, but somebody else's goal.
Well, until you call your state senator, man, because until the law gets changed,
That's the goal.
that's what we have to
That's
do.
a mandate.
That's all really for endangered species?
A good chunk of it is, yeah.
Good.
Some of
thought
it
it was
also
pretty
is related to the fully appropriated determination, which, man, you missed a fun meeting last week.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Being sick wasn't.
Which
bad.
is, not really related to endangered species, that's more related to like the overall, water supplies in the basin. So fully appropriated. So that's another set of things that we have to do sort of on top of the species things to maintain. We're fine.
But in front of East, do they have limitations on what they can use to? Are there allocations?
Nope, we're the
Well-
only ones who do that.
They have moratoriums and things like that. Yeah.
Right, but they don't have allocations.
So how come they don't have to have it? Just because we're over appropriated? If our water's going that way, can't they help by not using it?
Well, that sure would be nice, wouldn't it? Except that they're not required to have allocations, and moratoriums are two of the things that are in the NRD toolbox, but no NRD is required to do, other than the moratorium, no NRD is required to do. So they don't have to do allocations. They can pick something else. They've chosen to pick something else. It sure would make our jobs easier if they would pick allocations. But no.
Legislation can make that.
Yeah.
That's true.
Who made
Outside of a legislative mandate.
Let's work on that.
Well, yeah.
Let's use this drought proof meeting.
Okay, you guys be thinking about the production question. So you were talking about core yields. You were also talking about herd maintenance. And I'm gonna write your objective statement up here while you guys are thinking about that.
Crop
Production.
yields.
Production, which contains the subset of crop yields and herd.
Our goal is to maintain our upward trend on yields.
Profitability. Sustainable profitability. Gotta be able to make money at least sometimes.
Maintain upward trends in yields and reduce, and hopefully a downward trend on cost.
Really two things.
Our cost per unit.
So your goal statement is to continue to increase yields?
Continue our upward trend, yeah. Continue to increase yield.
Continue upward trend.
Well, and should we expand that by saying, by maintaining with less water usage, with more efficient water usage?
Okay.
If you have to use more water to do it, that's going to be tough.
Or how about without increasing
Okay.
water usage? Okay, your next one is reduced stream flows. So be thinking about that one for a second. What's your goal statement for reduced stream flow?
To maintain adequate stream flows by, there could be several ways of doing that.
Sure, but those are objectives. If you want to start talking about how,
Maintain.
what is the what? What is the thing you want to do?
Maintain more consistent stream flows.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Or increase stream flow.
okay.
That's hard to do because a lot of our stream, like the main river, the reservoir is up west.
We need more
Dictate how much-
reservoirs is what we need.
Yeah, sorry.
That's what did you call it?
That's the objective.
Okay. More reservoirs to level out the stream flow.
Right.
Is
So
subjective.
A lot of
The
it's
goal
out of
is
our
to maintain
control.
the stream flow.
Okay,
So there's probably some things we can do to do that.
okay, so the goal statement is maintain or increase stream flow?
Whatever I need. I'm sure they're all at different stages.
Sure.
I'd say
At any
level-
rate, you don't want it to go down.
I think leveling the stream flows would be a good way to say.
What
They're
do you
high
mean
in
by
they're high in the spring and they're low in the summer, and we have to level the stream flows. So
reduce the variations in the flows.
Okay, so maybe you're talking about reducing the variability in stream?
Mine was a question.
Well, but I think
variability
that
or
is what,
vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you want to say
okay,
it. Of irregular stream flows.
okay.
I don't know if it's even feasible.
It's hard to do.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
It's an engineering feat for sure.
Yeah.
So, but what the impact that you're trying to get at is that low stream flows when you need it, as opposed to high stream flows when you don't as much. So the goal is it to try to,
Do you regulate stream flow? You don't want them too high, you don't want them too low. I don't know how you say that.
well, regulate has a specific meaning.
Control.
Which is, yeah, well, and that is, but regulate is usually something's job in particular. So, but the goal is to, what is the word that you used right on first?
Well, I said level, but I mean, there's better ways of saying that too.
Level, I mean, they're probably regulated. Level is the same.
Right. well, I think,
have a more consistent
okay.
throughout the year. I mean, that's what they want, isn't it? Or is it always more?
There are certain times of the year where it needs to be more.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, some of those times are when there's less. Some of the, a lot
Why,
of them are in the
why?
summer.
Just to get it downstream? Is that why they need to be?
Because it needs to arrive at a certain stretch of the river at a certain time. And so because of the transit time that it takes for the water to get from there to here, from here to there, we have to think about it sort of in advance, you know. For the species, it has to do with nesting and migration. But then there are also downstream uses that are also there. Irrigation canals past Lake McConaughey, not just up here, so they need it in summer as opposed to spring. Let's see. Maybe I mitigate this.
Strategies.
Okay, develop strategies
Again, to maintain more consistent flows, river flows.
Okay, or maybe to maybe develop strategies to address stream flow variability.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, your last one is impact on wildlife and recreation. So you guys be considering that while I write this down. This is your last thing, guys. You get to leave after you come up with this goal statement.
Could you repeat that last one, please?
Yes, this one is negative impact on wildlife and recreation. This is the last one you're coming up with a statement for.
And a habitable ecosystem for areas, wildlife,
Okay.
and enjoyment of people.
Okay. Maintaining the ecosystem for wildlife habitat.
Conserving the environment for wildlife and recreation
Recreation
available.
opportunities, okay.
Recreational opportunities.
Okay, do you like maintain the ecosystem better or do you like conserve the environment better? Okay.
Let's see. Conserve, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but
What's the difference between a goal and objective?
So a goal is the thing you want to do. So it's a what. The objective is how you intend to do that. So, and it doesn't have to have like every single step that you're going to do it, but it starts to explain how you're going, what things you're going to do, how you're going to take steps to meet that what that you decided. So like here, this is the thing you're trying to do. This is one of the ways that, or two of them really, two of the ways that you want to do it. Does that make sense? Okay. So conserve the environment for wildlife habitat and recreation opportunities. Is that our statement? Okay.
Oh, we can go home.
You can go home. Oh, yes. And Joe has homework. Environment.
You want to answer that?
And stability, maybe opportunity and stability. Stability, is that in the conservation one?
It can be. Well, do you want it to be?
Stability.
Well, is it stability of the environment or is it stability of the recreation industry?
So opportunities.
So how about I put in conserve the environment for the stability of
Yeah.
okay.
why do you need anything after recreation?
Pardon me?
Why do you need anything set after recreation there? Just conserve
Okay.
environment for wildlife, habitat, and recreation.
Conservation is one thing, but then stability is more level, say lake levels and wildlife numbers. I guess it could fit in the conservation.
Okay.
Some
So,
might
but
look
you
at that.
wanna get rid of this part.
Well,
just
some
have
people might
regular-
look at that and perceive that as, well, we gotta increase this area to maintain it, or to make it more opportunity available.
Okay.
So, it might be, I would just put a period there, yeah.
Yeah, right there. Oh, I
We
see.
don't really need
You
any
took
more.
opportunities, I see.
Yeah, that's what he was talking about. I think stability does make sense.
Okay.
Okay. Is everybody happy with all these 5 goal statements?
At this moment.
Okay. You get it? Okay, so these are gonna get posted on Google Docs, like I talked about last week. So if there is tinkering that you wanna do with this, you'll have the ability to comment on stuff. If you wanna change these, if you wanna rephrase them, if you, as a group, decide, no, one of these is completely silly, we should have considered this one instead. Because what's gonna happen with these is we're gonna take these to all of the next set of group meetings, and we're going to say, okay, the ag group says these are the things we need to be talking about. And so one of the things you're going to talk about in those groups is, along with everybody else's goal statements, you're going to start to talk about what's important to you guys, and learn about what's important to other sectors, and then you're going to start to winnow down what are the things that we really want to try to accomplish. So everybody's set of goal statements is not going to make it into the plan. That would be a ginormous plan. So, but you're going to start the process of trying to figure out what are really the things that we ought to be honing in.
I know this is just ag-related, but I know in the back of my mind, I'm sure others, this burden needs to be shared. And I mean, yeah, we focused on the ag group, but there's, like you said, there's other industries and other groups.
Sure, and we're talking to them too about
Right,
those
and
things, that's those same things.
I want them to realize the burden that we carry as an ag community on this water issue.
Right,
I
and
don't
this
think
next,
municipalities or a lot of other industries do not realize or recognize the steps we have taken in the past to save the water.
sure, and I think that in these next couple of sets of meetings where you're talking to people from a lot of different areas and different sectors, that's where you'll be able to talk about those sorts of things, so that when you start to talk about the so let's say that this becomes a goal, that everybody agrees this is a goal, and you start to talk about the objectives. We want to, ideally, everybody should understand that if you're prescribing an objective, what does that really mean? Like what are in the range of possible solutions that you could come up with to meet this goal? Which ones are the reasonable ones? And are they reasonable for everybody, or are they only reasonable for one set of people? And so in that case, if it's only reasonable for one set of people, does it make sense to have that in a plan? Or should we be coming up with solutions that are reasonable for everybody? Does that make sense? And we're officially done. I'm going to turn the recording off now.